I am a writer, a doctor, a nuclear physicist, and a theoretical philosopher. But above all, I am a man, a hopelessly inquisitive man. Just like you, Matt. This is the Master on the Cause Cult of Movies podcast.
If you guys were the inventors of Facebook, you've invented Facebook.
I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned my boy!
Once said that he regrets Hiroshima.
Because I gotta get back to her. I don't know.
Welcome to the Cause Cult of Movies podcast. I'm Jacob Finus.
I'm Matt Whalen.
And we're the hosts of this new podcast. Yeah. So today we are talking about Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master. It is a film that we both we worked together. That's how we met. And in my interview, Matt interviewed me, and we talked about The Master. So it has been a crucial part of our friendship. So yeah,
well, because when I first met you, I just knew I'd met you before. In previous lifetimes, so you know
exactly. We were in the Prussian army, and we
we'll get to it. We'll get to it.
Yeah. So, well, first off, Matt, how are you doing? You get a year older.
I'm older. I am older. I turned 30 a few days ago. So yeah, older, and for my 30th birthday, I decided to start a podcast.
There you go. What better way to deal with the life crisis of 30 years old? Well, I'm 35, so it's equally life crisis. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's just, I guess, jump right into it. So, Matt, how did first thing I want to ask you is, how did you discover this movie? How did you discover Paul Thomas Anderson? How did you discover The Master?
Well, I think I discovered Paul Thomas Anderson first through Boogie Nights. That's kind of the first entry point for a lot of teenagers, and I was in high school at the time. And I remember my brother had the old DVD paper case, where it was like a cardboard case. And he kind of we didn't watch it together. It was kind of like, hey, when you have time, you should watch this movie, but don't tell mom and dad. And it was very much like, I got you, we're good. So I watched that. And then through that, I kind of discovered him a little bit, sort of slowly. And I think The Master must have been on Netflix or something when I was using my first, laptop or something, and I was discovering it that way. And so I just kind of became obsessed with rewatching The Master, even before I really understood auteur theory and the fact that this guy also made Boogie Nights. I knew, logically that's what was going on, but I didn't really compute the fact that the same guy could have made the same movie in that way. And sort of, when I would watch it, I just couldn't figure it out. So I would just rewatch it. And it was nice to just have on sometimes. It was also nice to sit down late at night and watch it. Cause that's what you do when you're 17 years old, is you just watch The Master at 3 o'clock in the morning. And yeah, ever since then, it's just been a movie that I come back to for just to feel good, to think about the things that it's, the questions that it's asking. And it's just always been sort of an important movie for me to kind of rely on. But what about you?
Yeah, so we just discussed seconds ago, I'm a little bit older than you. So The Master came out the year I turned 21, and it was the year I really was going to film school, and it was the year that I made my first short film that you can find on this web page, and see that it's a ripoff of The Master. I'm pretty much trying to play Freddie Quill. But so I had seen There Will Be Blood in film school. And I thought it was incredible, and it kind of similar to you said about The Master. I was like, I don't really know what this is about, but it's awesome. I want more of this.
Yeah.
And I literally said, you can make movies like that. I want to make movies like that. That's what I said. But then weirdly, I didn't dive into Paul Thomas Anderson after that. I was just I was learning so many new movies at the time, going through all the classics and stuff, that I was kind of going by film instead of filmmaker. That did just happen. But I was going by film instead
the
of
way
filmmaker.
That looked, by the way, is that it looked like you had another one ready to go. It fell on the floor.
Yeah, there's 50 of these. I've won a lot,
Yeah.
But then I remember the teaser for The Master came out, And it was like, it was 2012. It was the year of Avengers. It was the year of Dark Knight Rises. And like, this was just the teaser alone was so singular and so unique compared to everything else coming out. I remember all of us like in film school were just like, what is this? And then I saw it was the same guy that did There Will Be Blood. And I was like, oh. And so I remember when it came out, I was managing a movie theater. We didn't get it. And so I couldn't see it opening weekend because I was working, and I bought tickets for that Monday and that Tuesday because I knew I wasn't going to understand it on one viewing. And I remember going and seeing like a 1:00 Monday show, and it's all like, seniors, and I'm the only one like laughing at like Freddie Quill jerking off on the beach. I'm like, this is awkward, but like, and I remember like the first time seeing it, I was like, I don't know what that was, but that was like amazing. And I saw it many times since, of course. And at first, like, I really struggled. Like, there was a long time I like looked at it how a lot of people look at Full Metal Jacket, where it's like the first half is the greatest movie ever, and then the second half was and like I kind of like basically like up into like the jail scene, I was like, that's the greatest movie ever, and then afterwards I don't know what the hell's going on. And like I love the early stuff that's kind of like John Steinbeck-esque, and him like just being a drifter, and then when they first meet and all that. But as I have continued to get into the film, I now love the movie equally from beginning to end. And it is my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson film, and it is my second favorite film. I really only have, I can't give you a top 10, but I can give you a top 2, and it's number 2. And Joaquin Phoenix is my second favorite performance of all time. So I love this movie. And my hot take is I think this is maybe the best acted movie all around. Like, I just think every performance is incredible. So I love this movie. Paul Thomas Anderson, as you can see, Boogie Nights. He's my favorite filmmaker. I love him. He's incredible. I don't think he's made a bad movie. I just really, The Master was what, because I'd seen There Will Be Blood, but again, like I said, I was going through films. So The Master was one that made me like dive into PTA and who he is as a filmmaker. And it was actually, I think, a really interesting introduction, because it's definitely like his not really like I think Boogie Nights or There Will Be Blood makes more sense as an introduction. So it's kind of funny that like The Master was the one that was like, oh, here we go, but yeah. I do remember that like when it first came out, so it was his first film after There Will Be Blood, like we said. And at the time, There Will Be Blood was like, that was his most successful film as far as the combination of like awards success, prestige, and box office. Didn't make quite as much money as Boogie Nights, but it obviously was more prestigious. Daniel Day-Lewis winning best director or best actor, and it barely losing best picture to another great film and all that kind of thing. And so I actually think that kind of hurt the initial response for The Master, because I think everyone was like, oh, he's coming out with this, Scientology expose, coming off of this great film. And I it's not really a Scientology expose, he kind of, he uses the early time of Scientology kind of really as settings for his characters. And he explores a lot of themes and everything, of course, but it's really more about the people. But yeah, that was interesting. And I think it came in a moment, like all 3 actors were nominated for Oscars. He wasn't nominated for director or screenplay. And it was like a movie that I think at the time, like, this is just really amazing performances. And like, it's good. PTA did a good movie, and then it's kind of moved on. But now, and it's still not like, if you look at like Letterboxd and a lot of stuff where it's like fan ratings, it's still not his highest rated movie or anything. But like, I think it as time has moved on, and he's released other stuff, people are like, oh yeah, this is really unique. And this is something like, he never repeats himself, but this is like really something even more unique than the others.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is the movie where he's working out something, and every movie is a version of that. I mean, Magnolia is him working out the death of his father, and Boogie Nights is him working out the loss of family and unity and trying to grow up. And there's, every movie and every piece of art is something where somebody's working something out. But this is one where it's not very clear what he's working out. We don't know if it's his
going clear.
Well, yeah. But we don't know if it's, his religion or if it's his identity, or I know that we'll talk about this later, but there's definitely some elements of like his friendship with Philip Seymour Hoffman. There's lots of things that he's pointing to, but there's not one thing that he's like, this movie is, because you can kind of say with like There Will Be Blood, it's like, well, this is about American capitalism and how it was corrupt from the beginning. It was built on, the back of corruption itself, and greed. But I just think that this movie is really singular in his filmography because it is so, it's almost in a really kind of fun way. It's nearly unfinished. There's not really a clear, it's just kind of like, this is what I had at this time. I don't want to say anymore. I know there's stuff cut out but it's not a very cut and dry, like the plot's not really there. It's just kind of, you can plot it out if you want to, but it's just kind of like, I don't know, it's essayistic and kind of goes off like with what you're saying about the jail scene. Cause right after that, he does window to the wall scene. And that is so
Dolo.
yeah. Where he just break dances.
Yeah.
With Betty White. But no, it's very singular, like you're saying. And I appreciate that. Sometimes it's not something that you want to watch, sometimes it's more fun to just be like, I just want to throw on Boogie Nights because that's a good time. This isn't always a good time. There are elements that are really fun, but it is a movie that if you want to really sit down and absorb it, you kind of have to be ready for it. So it's not always the type where you really want to just like hang out with it. Although like you're saying, the first half feels like that, and then it gets into the kind of weirdness of the second half, and that's an interesting way to put together a film to follow up a film about large scale greed and biblical themes.
Right. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. And talking about kind of going from this giant thing with There Will Be Blood. What's interesting is, so this was the first film at the time since 1996 to film on 70 millimeter. And when you think of 70 millimeter, they're normally these giant scale, like big, vistas. I think like when I think of 70 millimeter, the two like kind of like ultimate 70 millimeter experiences for me personally, I've been seeing Lawrence of Arabia in 2001 in 70 millimeter. And then modern, like after he did it, then it's like you have Christopher Nolan has really done a lot with 70 millimeter IMAX. You had Sinners to 70 millimeter. These are bigger movies. These are like kind of blockbuster, and yet he picks to do 70 millimeter on a film that's mostly people's faces, and I think that perfectly shows like what kind of filmmaker he is that he thinks that the character is epic. He thinks the human is epic. And like you can like get like real film schooly about it, where he would probably like roll his eyes, where it's like, well, in a world, in a world that supposedly is like millions of years of like your emotions represent all this different past trauma. It's
right.
Looking at the face is looking at the epic of but like it's like no, it's like he's just like that's what matters to him, and it's like it does remind me of that initial response about the Scientology thing, and it reminds me most recently of like One Battle After Another. We had people like the politics don't make sense, and like does he even have a political thought? And it's like I think a lot of that is being harsh. Like he clearly has very interesting ideas, and he's definitely exploring them, but he knows that like ultimately what's most important is the person and the character, and because in a lot of ways it's like all of the specific problem might change, but the human condition doesn't. So it's like whether it is an oil man or whether it is a mattress man, it's like he's dealing with the same thing. And so he uses these things as these places more as like settings. Like it's like this is a set, like the Scientology aspect is like a setting for the characters, and of course it creates theme and it helps explore these themes, but those themes are really represented in the characters and kind of what the characters are dealing with. And that's his choice to make it be a film right after World War II, and the idea of like a lot of times when something massive like that happens, I remember like when 9/11 happened, all of a sudden like everybody I knew that wasn't that religious was like going to church. It's like this idea when you experience something, even someone as messed up as Freddie, that's like he's like maybe there's something more, maybe I need to find something more, so I think I don't know, it's just an interesting way that he looks at it, whereas I think a lot of people, if they were like I'm gonna study the early bits of Scientology, I'm gonna, make this, Going Clear movie, and or if I'm going to get 70 millimeter, I'm gonna make this huge, Sandal and Swords epic, which is just not how he is.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that it definitely is an interesting way to explore the themes in terms of, like you're saying, people's faces and close-ups and things that we don't normally associate 70 millimeter with, especially nowadays. But I mean, even before, we say nowadays because that's what we're living in, and it has definitely exploded. I mean, with IMAX sort of becoming the format that people sell their movie off of. I mean, even movies that aren't technically like using IMAX cameras and not Christopher Nolan coded are saying shot for IMAX theaters. Like we promise we'll try to get this in an IMAX. I mean, a Netflix Cliff Booth movie is going into IMAX just because they know that that's a promotional item for people as much as the popcorn buckets are now. So there definitely is a reason to go see IMAX, but
why don't we have a master popcorn bucket? Come on.
Because it would make you sad.
What would it be?
I don't want to know. Just the close-up. Well, I don't want to say what the close-up is. It's just Amy Adams turning her eyes black. But no, I think that the movie itself is shot on 70 millimeter, and there are moments where you see great wide shots, especially in the beginning. And I'd love to talk more about what you're saying with like the World War II when we get to it, that aspect of the story. But in terms of the format, I mean, Christopher Nolan was doing this around the same time, and he was shooting like the bank heist scenes and other scenes in The Dark Knight.
He was shooting those in IMAX specifically. But yeah, you're correct.
Yeah, and I just think that filmmakers have always been interested in this. The movie that you're talking about, 96, was Hamlet, and I mean that's Kenneth Branagh, but he's working with some of the best people in the craft at that time, and he was just as interested. It's of interest, but you really have to be ready to take that on because it is a big step for most people, and it does require a lot of extra work, and there's a lot more handcrafted elements to it. And somebody like Paul Thomas Anderson or Christopher Nolan or Ryan Coogler, they like, as much as they like the thematic elements of movies, they also really, really like the technical elements of filmmaking, and specifically filmmaking, not just digital print. And so there is a certain level of just kind of, it's just kind of a nerd culture element to it, just a little bit and now it's kind of expanded into like mainstream, but he definitely is one of the first new wave of people who was like, we should use this more, and then you have VistaVision starting to come out with his most recent film.
And Digger now is filmed on VistaVision, so that who knows, he might have started another trend,
And I mean, La La Land, I think, was shot on VistaVision, so
it wasn't shot on VistaVision. He used the VistaVision logo as like a nostalgia thing, but it wasn't actually shot. Yeah,
I see. Okay, well, that's why it looks like crap. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, it's one of my favorite movies. We'll probably do that on this movie. On this podcast. I'm gonna force it. But no, I like that movie. It's a good movie.
The only other podcast I ever went on, I debated that it was a 5-star movie with the person who didn't agree. So I mean, we can do that.
So he was never seen again. That person?
Yeah, he's dead in a ditch. I knocked on his door at 3 a.m. and beat him up, and then Damien Chazelle was like, "No, we have to remember how we met. Don't do that."
Bad boy. Damien Chazelle likes to call you a bad boy. Anyway, continue with what you were saying. VistaVision IMAX 70 millimeter is great.
Yeah. So I do think like one thing you mentioned about we're talking about like kind of the text of the film itself. And it kind of goes in with me talking about how his focus is character is, you mentioned the plot is so it's not very strong as far as like linear. And I think it's because it's like he has, the main, we're from the position looking at the movie through the eyes of a drifter, like, and, Freddie just goes wherever, his feelings take him. And I think that is really interesting, and I think that helps build I think that's the right choice for a movie like this that has all these different ideas. So like you said, he's not just giving, I mean, he never does. He's not one of those people who spoon feeds the audience, but it's like, this is like even the least, this makes There Will Be Blood look spoon fed, you know, it's like, and it kind of like, it's really like you're Freddy at the beginning of the movie looking at a Rorschach test and he's going, you know, what do you see? You know, and most people are like, well, I see it. So it represents this and that and that. And then PTA is going, I see a cock and a pussy. And I think that's another thing I love about PTA that I haven't mentioned yet is I love that he's got, you know, he makes these highbrow films, but he has a genuine love for like lowbrow humor and kind of doesn't take himself too seriously. And I feel like I'm sure there's like some self-mythologizing to that. Like, oh, in this interview, I'm going to talk about how I'd rather watch, you know, Happy Gilmore than Lawrence of Arabia or something. Like, I'm sure there's some self-mythologizing there, but I think a lot of it's genuine. And I think, you know, we'll talk about the, you know, arguably the most important scene in this film is interrupted by a fart joke. You know, it's like, and you know, he won Best Picture on a movie that has, you know, a dick joke in the first, you know, 5 minutes. So, you know, it's just, I think that adds. I think that's one reason I like this movie so much is I think that you kind of feel that like, let's not take this so seriously, but it is serious through the whole film because like he's making fun of these people, but he also generally loves these people. Like he's interested in these characters. And I don't know, it doesn't feel so stuffy, you know. I think on paper it's like this could be a really stuffy like Oscar bait movie, you know. Exact same with like Phantom Thread. As I think if someone read me the like what Phantom Thread was about, and then I would have been like, well, that sounds incredibly boring and like Oscar baity, and then it's like, oh, it's Paul Thomas Anderson. I'm like, okay, I'm there day one, and then it's like amazing, you know. It's like he, and a lot of that comes from like he sees the humor in a lot of this stuff. He sees that like sometimes we all take it a little too seriously, and it's a little, he like sees through the bullshit, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think he to me it seems like he takes his characters very seriously, which is important, like you're saying, with the use of the camera on close-ups and things. And I don't think he takes himself very seriously. I think he takes the art of filmmaking seriously. But there have been people who talk about him on set, and they're like, he doesn't really plan everything out. He's there to just kind of figure it out and find it along the way with the actors, with the crew. But he's also very much in control. He has a pretty small crew, and he's now become his own cinematographer, because not on this film, The Master, but in more recent films, I think starting with Phantom Thread.
And then he gave away the title for One Battle, but it's with the same guy that he was kind of co-DPing the last film. So he definitely is way more hands-on than he was in the earlier days.
Right. And I think, you know, that type of like, especially in the newer films, posts or starting with and then after There Will Be Blood, there is a lot more humor. I mean, even There Will Be Blood is not the funniest movie. I mean, he really doesn't get into that sense of humor until a little bit later, but
yeah, I don't know. I find Daniel Plainview pretty funny, but I might just be psychotic.
To me, I think the difference, I've never thought about this, but to me, the difference between like Daniel Plainview and Reynolds Woodcock is probably to do with like Paul Thomas Anderson doesn't think Reynolds Woodcock is scary, but I do think he thinks Daniel Plainview is a little scary.
For sure. I think with Daniel Plainview and Lancaster Dodd, there's I do find it funny how serious you take yourself.
Right.
But yes, I think he does fear both. I think there's obviously a lot of what Dodd represents that is fearful to him, like the control and the manipulation. But I think there's also a lot that he finds quite funny, and the character himself, I do think he likes Master.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's, before we get into the categories, let's kind of do a little backstory of the film itself. And as anyone who, if you've listened up to this point, it's obvious. So we just assume you've seen this film. Like this podcast isn't going to really go over like specific plot and all that. Like the movie's 12 years old. Like just go watch the movie. So like a little bit of backstory. And so a lot of this came from, there's a John Huston documentary called Let There Be Light. And John Huston was commissioned to make a documentary about these soldiers coming back from the war as a tool for propaganda. And the American government refused to release it because it did the opposite of what propaganda is supposed to do. And there's scenes taken verbatim of like when Freddy is looking at the Rorschach test, when Freddy's interviewing and he's talking about, I didn't have a dream, I had a vision. All of that is like verbatim from this documentary, and it's just them interviewing these real veterans in the 40s right after the war. And it's really, really interesting. I think it's really worth watching. And it just not even connected to this movie. It's just that it's a very interesting documentary. It wasn't released. I might be wrong about this, but I feel like it wasn't released till like the 70s or something because they had held it up so long. But that was, I think, a big part of the fact that it's a lot of things taken for verbatim. I think that was a big jumping off for him. And then also he said that, obviously him and Philip Seymour Hoffman have made all these films together. And he was like, he's never been, it's always like he's there 2 days and then he leaves because he's always, doesn't have the biggest roles. And so it was really important for him. He wanted to make a movie with him where he was, if not the lead, kind of like the co-lead. And from a structure standpoint, Freddy is the lead, but obviously Master is, he's the titular character. He's you could argue he's not technically the lead, but yeah. So yeah, there you go. So and so I think a lot of it came from just wanting to make a movie with Philip Seymour Hoffman, and I do think PTA has said he has on record said this is his favorite of his films. And as someone who's always like the Master's is best, I like to throw that card. But I actually think, if I'm being honest, it's probably because it's the film he got to make with his best friend the most, and then his best friend, tragically passed away. So I think that's probably why. Same reason I literally watched the Criterion Closet video this morning with Cooper Hoffman where he said The Master was his favorite PTA movie, and it's like, well, duh. So but yeah, that was a big thing. And so originally, I don't even know if you know this, but originally they got the film together, and it was Jeremy Renner in the Joaquin role.
I'd heard that,
and the funding kind of fell through. There was like mixed reports of funding fell through because obviously this is not the most commercial script, right, even coming off There Will Be Blood. And there was also, and it did switch companies. So I think there's a little bit of truth to that. But I also, he said like the script just wasn't ready, and which is also believable because of the type of script it is. And I think obviously I just can't imagine Jeremy Renner in this role. But so, and then, like we said, he was coming off There Will Be Blood. I do think even though he didn't actually win the Oscar, I think he'd never been nominated for Best Director. He'd never been nominated for Best Picture. I think just being nominated for those things, it was kind of like, I think, freeing for him because I feel like this, I think his first couple of movies are obviously like Hard Eight is taken a lot from, it's taken a lot from like noirs, and there's a specific Jean-Pierre Melville film that it kind of takes a lot from, Bob the Gambler. And then, of course, Boogie Nights is like, it's Altman and Scorsese smashed together. So is Magnolia, good. I mean, Boogie Nights is kind of the Goodfellas of porn, and then Magnolia is pretty much shortcuts again. So I think, Punch Drunk Love was like the first film he made that was kind of like, this is a PTA movie. You can't like the influences aren't as much on his sleeve. And it wasn't, it was at the time, it was his least successful critically and financially film. It's now, a lot of people love it. I love that movie. But then I think for There Will Be Blood, be like, okay, I'm still just making it my own. There's my influences. If you know cinema history, you know who I'm pulling from, but like, this is one of my films. And then it gets nominated for Best Director, Best Picture, all that. I think that really put him in a place where he felt really confident and was able to make something like The Master, which is just like we talked about. It's just so out there, compared to anything he's done since.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely stands out in his filmography. And it's interesting to hear about the Renner aspect to it because of the fact that there's this, he's about to join the Avengers, but up until that point, it had been Hurt Locker was his kind of breakout role. He had done that movie about Jeffrey Dahmer that was really, really small. So he was he had hit the mainstream with Hurt Locker, but that was still, I think that remains like the least successful box office film to win Best Picture. And so it wasn't like this. It was critically massive, but I don't think it was, obviously very massive in its own right.
I think he might have got cast around the town was released, which makes a little bit more sense. because the town came out in 2010. This came out in 2012. I think they tried to film an 11 original. Well, actually, that might still be too late because I think if he scrapped it and came back, he might have been originally tried to film this around the time. But whatever. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, there's all that stuff about Matt Damon was supposed to be in town and all this kind of stuff. So
that's true.
Renner seems like the right fit in that moment, but I think Joaquin brings something that is undeniable. And we can get into this too. I honestly kind of don't buy him as an Army vet. That's my one sort of nitpick with this movie is I just don't see it. Whereas the Army vet stuff with somebody like Renner, who would eventually go on to be Hawkeye, is much more believable, but not as kind of ironically believable later in the movie when it's kind of flipped. And I don't think his dynamic with somebody like Philip Seymour Hoffman would have made as much sense. I think it would have just felt he's more like a James Dean. Yeah. And I just don't see that in terms of the vulnerability that Phoenix brings. But it's interesting to hear about just sort of the origins of how it came to be from just like a business standpoint a little bit. You know, you still, as auteur as you can be, you still have to talk with studios and companies. Yeah.
What's interesting is I guess he's just lucky that he never has wanted to make The Odyssey, is because he gets blank check movies, but it's like he can never go up. Like that's one reason why One Battle felt so unique, is like it felt like he got the blank check before he won the Oscar, but to win the Oscar, and like and because that movie didn't make that as much money, he's never ever gonna be able to do that again, probably. So
probably not.
Yeah, I mean, Warner Brothers, I think, is happy they won the Oscar, but I don't think they were that thrilled with the movie. So I think it just seems weird. Like it's funny because he has had, like, Inherent Vice was another one that he was supposed to do Inherent Vice before The Master, couldn't get funding, and then again, this is coming off The Ruby Blood, so it is kind of interesting that I think that's one reason he went back to after Inherent Vice was a big flop. He's like, I got to work with Daniel Day-Lewis again, you know, and I think One Battle After Another literally only exists because of Leo, and none of these things are just say, like, I mean, again, I'm not saying like flop, like these movies suck, you know, whatever. Great, there's plenty of great art that doesn't have mass appeal. I love these films, but yeah, it is interesting that like he's always fighting, and yet he's never had to be like, all right, he's doing a paycheck job like PTA's Die Hard 5, you know, like you know, he's never had to do a paycheck job, but it is like he really is fighting, and so that is interesting, and I agree with that. Obviously, you know, I've already said Joaquin Phoenix performance is one of my favorites. My only pushback is like that I will say to you on that is I do think, you know, in World War II, when they're just drafting anybody, is like what we think of as military guys. I mean, they're just drafting random dudes from the street, so might be a little different back then. There might be some guys that didn't fit that mold, but you could also argue after the war experience they would fit that mold. So we'll call it a tie.
No, I agree. I think that there's definitely it's interesting too. I mean, PTA, I know, is somebody who's also directed a fair number of music videos and done some photography and made some documentaries. So I think in terms of like, I always think about this with filmmakers who make movies that are not like the most successful, who aren't the Kuglers and the Nolans of the world, and even the Gerwigs. Even like Baumbach, somebody who's like just been around for a while. If you haven't been around for a while and you're making small movies, how do you afford your house payment? Because as an adult, that's all I can think about is how do people make money and have a house? Yeah. And I do think that he, you know, he's got a lot of kids and he's got a lot of connections. I mean, you mentioned One Battle After Another not making its money back, but it is his largest budget to date, and it's because of, I believe, Mike DeLuca at Warner Brothers. And that moment right before Warner Brothers is about to be sold, and Mike DeLuca and him have been together since Boogie Nights, and he trusts him, and it is kind of like a who you know business in a way. So if you can get the right people to just be like, yeah, give this guy, you know, and we're speaking in the terms of millions of dollars as a lot of money, but you know, with Hollywood, with that many people and with Leo attached, like you're saying, there are times, or Daniel Day-Lewis, or even Joaquin Phoenix and Josh Brolin with Inherent Vice, there are times when it's like, yeah, I think that movie would be good, and sure, we can funnel you some money, and you know, keep it under wraps and be quick about it. And you know, if you can work under a certain budget that isn't as big as we might think it is, and you can make a movie pretty quickly and get in and get out and move on, you know, why not? Then they have sort of an auteur on their roster, which helps them look, you know, you can get into the Oscars a little bit easier.
Yeah, yeah, you are correct on that. And I do think obviously like Warner Brothers for years they were known as the they were known as the filmmakers studio, and they basically for years, I mean, Clint Eastwood was there, Stanley Kubrick was there, then they
Nolan was there.
Nolan, exactly. And then that's exactly what is that, Project Popcorn, when they put all their movies straight to HBO. That's why Nolan left, and they all of a sudden destroyed that image. And so Mike DeLuca getting Ryan Coogler for Sinners, getting Paul Thomas Anderson for One Battle, that was a business decision in and of itself, just to try to rebuild that view of Warner Brothers. So there's reasons behind it. But now, like you said, that's kind of, there's just a lot of business, and so I'm just glad that he's managed to make the films. It does remind me, it gets a little off topic, and we'll get focused, but it reminds me, there's an interview with Todd Phillips, and he talks about how like he's only made like four films, and it was like when he was doing Tar, and he said that like he pays the bills just like shooting high-end commercials, and he's like I could shoot Avengers or something. He's like, but I like shooting commercials because like there's no bones about it. He's like, Avengers, you're pretending to make a movie, but you're actually making a commercial to sell action figures. Like,
right.
He's like, whereas like if I'm making a commercial, I'm like, I'm not selling out because it's just matter of fact. Like, yeah, you're selling this fragrance, versus like I'm trying to like deal with these characters. Like, well, they sell the most action figures. You can't kill them off, even though that's what the stories should do. So that's interesting. But
did you say Todd Phillips directed Tar? That
Todd. What's his name?
Todd Haynes.
No, it's not Todd Haynes. It's
who am I thinking of?
Todd Haynes is. Oh my god. Okay, we're gonna have to redo that whole section. So I don't want.
No, this is great because then
Todd Field. Todd Phillips
did the Joker, sir.
Todd Phillips did the Joker.
Todd Phillips is Tar.
Which I'm actually gonna have to mention that at some point in Joker. Todd Field. Wow. Okay. First episode, I look like an idiot. All right. So, okay. Before we're gonna get in the categories, real quick. Matt, I want you to go ISO. You don't really like sports, but ISO is a terminology in basketball, where it's like we give you the ball and we spread out and we let you go one-on-one. So I'm going to let you go ISO on the Freudian stuff. Let's just get that groundwork layered before we jump into the pod or the categories.
Sure, because I'm a Freudian expert. No, I mean there's been a lot of talk about this already, so I'm really just regurgitating what I've consumed already. But essentially, there's a theory that this movie is exploring the idea of the id, the ego, and the superego. And the reason, in my belief, that it's called The Master is because it is actually about Philip Seymour Hoffman, and it is about his ego. And then there is Amy Adams as his superego and his true inspiration. Because, I mean, when you do look at this as a Scientology movie, just briefly, the distinction is between that in that scene with Laura Dern towards the end of the movie when he asks her, what do you want? He's mad because she's picking nits at the fact that poking holes rather, at the fact that he's changed a single line, and that changes the trajectory of everything that he's been working on. And that is when can you imagine instead of can you recall? And I believe my reading of the movie is that I believe in terms of that change, it happens because of Freddy, and Freddy being the id, this little sort of drifter who wanders in. You could maybe even call it the muse in a way. He gets in, Amy Adams says as the superego says to the id Freddy on the deck of the yacht towards the beginning, right after he meets Master. She says, like, you've inspired him. Now, that is a muse-based idea. The muse comes and visits you. And here comes Freddy, this person who doesn't want anything aside from a place to stay. Comes in, acts, abhorrent at times, but has this, like, genuine spark of life that the Master needs. And when we first meet Lancaster Dodd, he has his head in his hands. He's hungover. He's kind of built this thing, but he's not sure what it is. And so he's wrestling with something, and his superego is like, you have people to take care of. You have you have an organization to be responsible for and to build and to continue to expand. And he's looking for something. Here comes Freddy the id to kind of inspire him. And then it becomes a war where he's caught in the middle between the id, constantly drinking and trying to have sex with everybody, which is very much a childlike thing that the id would represent. And then you have the superego who's at one point narrating the thoughts that then we see Lancaster Dodd typing out on the typewriter. And she's kind of his voice, is not nearly a conscience, but more somebody who's almost like I hate to put her in the terms of the mother figure, but in terms of like a parental sort of guide, I guess, for the ego of Lancaster Dodd to kind of just push him in the right direction. We need to build, we need to expand, we need to show them what we're about. And Freddy's like, yeah, but we could also just fart and fuck around and just hang out and get shit-faced. And that push and pull sort of pushes him into the direction of creating that change that happens that then creates the rest of what we believe might be Scientology. And that's how we get the school, is because Can You Imagine explodes the world, and then suddenly it does become a cult, right? Because in the scene with the pig fuck scene that we'll get to, there is the question of like, this is just the basis of a cult. It's one man's opinion. It's one man's view. And that's the basis of a cult. And using imagine instead of recall then creates this idea that, okay, maybe this is a cult because he is kind of just making this up as he goes along and he's selling it as a product, which is very much a super ego way to do it. But in order, I'm kind of going back on myself, but in order to do that, he needed Freddy to come into his life. And so it is a sort of a test about what inspires you and how do you take inspiration and turn it into actual successful, almost commercialized products. That's my Freudian corner.
Long story short, Freddy just represents our pure desires of, drinking and having sex.
Unfortunately, I cut out drinking, so I can't. I can just only do the second part.
Well, I've never drank in my life. All right.
Boring.
Cool. So,
just kidding.
Yeah. No. So, cool. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like this. I've always looked at it as, and this is maybe less Freudian, but while we're on the topic, and then I promise we'll get to categories. Is I've always looked at it as like, so like, Philip Seymour Hoffman has to be like this, kind of buttoned up, like he's representing this, new religion thing. And like, he's got to, is one of his things that they have to read and listen to is like, man is not an animal. Like, it's like bigger and better than your natural desires. And then here comes Freddy along, who's just all he is just a ball of desire, just like whatever he's feeling. He wants to sleep with this girl. He wants to drink, he wants to take this paint thinner and make some good drink out of it, and I think there's like a genuine, one reason their friendship is so, like natural is I think there's like a genuine attraction for both of them. It's like, I think Joaquin, even though, Freddy doesn't have a whole lot of thoughts in his head, I do think is like there is like a little bit of an attraction of like, do I need to, be a little bit more cleaned up? Is, I could get a little bit of what that guy has. And, I think for Master, it's definitely like, man, I really I want to let loose. Like I could really get what, a little bit of what he has. And I think that's part of that, the like strain in their relationship of why, like they're actually like, it's like, what is like, cause I think sometimes like a really simple reading is just like, oh, Master sees this like he's like Freddy's the dragon, and I think there's truth to that, but it's like Master sees the dragon, he wants to be the one to tame the dragon. If he can tame Freddy, then he proves that he is this cult-like figure, and I think there's truth to that. But I just think that if that's the only I think there's definitely truth to that, but if that's the only motivation of him, I think that's a much boringer look at their friendship, and I think their friendship is genuine.
I agree, and I think that's where the Amy Adams character is kind of a fun foil, because she's getting in the way. It's kind of a screwball comedy in that way, where it's like it's a love triangle of like, you really want her to get out of the way so these two guys can just be together, and it's really fun to watch.
It's to use his PTA's love of lowbrow humor. It's kind of the art house Apatow film. You have the two, you have the man child who's trying to get the other guy to loosen up, and then you have the wife character who's like, you've got to be an adult.
And I do think, to go back to this idea of like, if that's true, if what you're saying is true in terms of like looking at it from like a lowbrow sort of screwball comedy perspective, to then only a few people like PTA, and I'm not saying he's the only one. I think he's not singular, but I think that there are a few people who could figure out that you could put that with the idea of like the Let There Be Light documentary.
Absolutely.
And like that's where you get a movie like this, which is just like not many people can put those two things together naturally. No. And then I also wanted to talk, and it occurred to me when you were talking about vets coming back from the war, and we can get into it later, but one of my favorite readings of this movie too is the idea that Freddy's kind of going to always be disillusioned with life, because we meet him, he's disillusioned because of the war. Then he starts to believe and actually try and practice what is being preached by Master and the rest of the members of the cause. And then he finds that that's also kind of, there's not really a point to it, just like with what he felt during the war. And so he leaves that as well, because there's just he can't find this thing that other people seem to grapple with or grasp onto. He's just sort of like, this is as empty as the war, as empty as, picking cabbage or whatever he's doing in that scene, shucking corn. So it's a fun way to read the movie of just like, he begins and ends disillusioned. He doesn't, he changes, he matures, he sees the world. It's almost like he doesn't understand at the beginning why the world is like this. And by the end, he's on dry land. He's he's with people who take care of him, and he still kind of feels like he's like, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's why, like, a lot of people think that when it cuts back to him on the beach at the end of the movie, that it's like, you can interpret it's all been a dream, and like, if you want to, I guess. But like, I look at it as like, that's basically like kind of what you said. It's like he's experienced it all, and he's still just that guy who's lonely on the beach and can't, and he's trying to make, in that case, he's making a woman out of snow, out of sand, but he's trying to make something that'll make him happy, and it won't,
Right.
So,
right.
Which, speaking of, him doing all this research, is I saw in my dad gave me a World War II book, and it actually had some pictures of sand women that the Navy men were making. So I guess that was a thing.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I just don't know if they were fingering.
No, I don't think that.
My favorite part of that is watching the other guys just be like, "Oh God, I gotta go over here." This is sad.
Well, they've probably been on that ship with him for like years. So they're probably like, "Here he goes again."
Yeah, Freddy.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, let me jump into the categories.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so I'll explain since it's the first episode, I'll explain each category when we get to it. They're pretty self-explanatory. We kind of look at the categories as a jumping off point to continue the discussion, not necessarily just listing things off. So here we go. All right, so our first category is, like I said, self-explanatory. Favorite scene. Matt, would you like to go first?
Sure. My favorite scene probably, it's kind of a cop-out, because I will say the best scene of the movie is processing, but it's not my favorite scene to, like, if I just wanted to watch a scene on YouTube for a clip or something. But it's when Freddy, it's right after he wakes up after sneaking onto the boat, and it's when he meets Master into getting breakfast on the deck, and that's when he has that conversation with Peggy. Those kind of that stretch of the movie is like my favorite, where it's calm, it's quiet, things haven't gotten stressful or weird quite yet, and it's just him sort of finding a family, which is another PTA theme, and it's him kind of, everything looks really nice, it's calm to be on that yacht, it's beautiful, it's during the day, there's a breeze, there's food, and there's also just one of my favorite quotes, which we can get to later, and yeah, it's one of the best stretches of the movie for me.
What I love about this scene specifically when they first meet is, again, talking about the film being from Freddy's perspective, is to the audience, it's our first time meeting them, and to Freddy, it's their first time meeting. But it's, as you, through the dialogue, you learn that Freddy talked to Dodd the night before, and he was just so drunk he doesn't remember. And I love that, because it's, it's an interesting choice. Most filmmakers wouldn't even try to do that, because it's like, it can throw off it's like what he's talking about is if they know each other, he's not. And I think what's so cool about it is that you can put, like, with the context clues, you're like, okay, he was just drunk and, talked to him and then he slept it off and now he doesn't remember. But you could also interpret it as, oh no, Dodd is this mythical figure. He already knows him, they know from another life, and I just think, going back to talking about how he kind of basically said this movie's about my friendship with Philip Seymour Hoffman, is like, the idea of like, let me make a movie about friendship that is dealing with this whole, Dianetics thing that became Scientology, is the idea of like when you meet somebody and you're like, oh my, like you just have natural chemistry, to be like, what if that natural chemistry is from the fact that we've been friends for 12 lifetimes? Like, I just think that's like such a smart way of exploring that. And like this idea of like, it's all, I've said this to you before, but like I one thing I love about this movie is like, there is obviously a very pessimistic, negative connotation in regards to the cult aspect in Scientology as a whole, but it's not as mean spirited as Adam McKay's The Master would be, and I think part of it is, I do think PTA, the whole thing with characters, he genuinely loves people. He's like a humanist, but I do think part of it is like, I think he's like, I can have respect for a pure version of this, doesn't necessarily mean he believes it, doesn't, but it's like, he's kind of like, I like the idea of some of this stuff. And I think, going like similar to like the Frogs and Magnolia or whatever, like, I think there's like a part of him that's like, yeah, like I get it. Like I get like wanting to find something more. And if you could find it in a pure form that's not hurting people, good for you, like I respect it. And I think that kind of lays like that is a perfect way of kind of laying with this, like, oh yeah, what if we did have Pat? Like, what if me and Phil were hanging out in the 1800s? So but yeah, I think that's my favorite part about that scene. So that's a good choice.
What about you?
So, well, I wanted to mention, I already mentioned it, so I don't really have to mention it again, but I'll mention it briefly, and then I'll say mention one more time. Mention. but I just the opening like prologue thing, when I first got into this movie, I just loved seeing him on the boat, seeing him on the beach, him, flirting with the girl that's showing off the dress or coat or whatever. But and then I do think that another scene, like you mentioned, the processing scene, it's not my choice either, but I kind of feel like I don't know if it'll come up again in the podcast. So I don't know if maybe, since it is the most important scene in the film, to talk about it for a moment. I think obviously, like, he even said that where all of this really started was that he needed something to write people talking back and forth, and he had a copy of like the old Dianetics questions, and so that this was the first scene he started doing it, and obviously it blew up into this whole thing. And just this idea of like, okay, having two characters talk back and forth, and it's revealing narrative, like it's revealing backstory, but it's also revealing character. It's kind of like the perfect scene. And the performances are incredible. It's shot very simply. He has one shot on Philip Seymour Hoffman, one shot on Joaquin Phoenix, and just cuts them back and forth. And then when it does have like the flashback of Freddy, there's something like really soothing about how he takes out the music, cuts to it. It's like, and then you see like the white picket fence, which I know you've talked about before, and everything. And it's just kind of like, Joaquin's like, he's like, recall a color, and he's like navy blues. It's just like very calming, that introduction into like the like it does kind of like feel like hypnotism. And that's not even talking, like I said, obviously the narrative and like Joaquin like exploding in the scene and everything. That's just a great scene. But and I think the second probably most important scene is what you already talked about with Laura Dern, is like, what do you recall? And I think that represents like that to me, that's where like most of the stuff about like this is bad is like the most negative aspect, like talking about him not being as mean spirited. That's kind of where a lot of that scene has the most of that, where it's like, this is like this is pretty messed up. But I also think it's funny because I look at it as like it's a way, it's like a PTA, like this is me when all these film brothers are like, so like it's like There'll Be Blood, I feel like it represents America, and he's like, yes. But I just think that scene is I think it's kind of the second most important scene in the movie. But my favorite scene, all this is leading up to my actual favorite scene, which is the jail scene, which I love the jail scene. I think I think it perfectly encaptures both characters. I think it's only two shots, but the one main shot, it's got like Freddy and one cell just going crazy, and then it's got Philip Seymour Hoffman in the other scene, just like very straight, very stern, and then that one line between them, just showing the contrast, and then just the performance is great, both of them, and them yelling at each other, and I just think I love that scene because to me, I find it funny, but I also see the dramatic impact of it, but and it's I could save this for favorite moment, but I'll add it. I'll just go and say it is. It added a vernacular for myself that I've used many times as a manager when he's telling Joaquin Phoenix, "You lazy ass piece of shit," and I've used that a lot as a manager, not to their faces, but always like,
of course, not to
behind their back. Yeah, going into
going
in the manager's office talking to the other manager, like, he's such a lazy ass piece of shit.
My favorite part of that scene too is actually really important, which is that he's echoing what Jesse Plemons says, which we haven't mentioned his name before in the podcast yet, but he says, like, you're making all of this up, you're making this shit up, like, and that's something that he takes from his son, who is kind of a piece of shit throughout the movie. He doesn't trust Freddy and doesn't trust his father, blah blah blah. But using that scene and sort of echoing that line and seeing Freddy start to kind of push back on the idea that Master knows anything that he claims to know and is not actually full of shit. It's kind of the first, but then he gets into it, and so it's like he pushes back, but then he kind of comes back, and it isn't until later that he actually leaves. But I really like that scene too, just because it's so much fun. It's also really gnarly because he fucking pulled his teeth. He like sewed his half of his mouth closed or whatever, and then he pulls it out, and you see the blood.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a horror movie to me. I can't watch that. This is so tough, but it's a very fun scene.
That's good stuff. All right, what is your favorite next category? Favorite shot. Again, self-explanatory. What is your favorite shot of the film?
I would probably say as Freddy jumps onto the boat after the prologue and he sneaks on, and then it just sort of pans over and we see the boat go underneath the bridge just as the sun is coming up, is my one of my favorite shots of all time. I mean, there's a lot of symbolism you can look into in that scene, in that shot, but that to me is like the best shot of the movie. There's 1,000 of them, but that's my favorite. What about you?
Well, before I say mine, I have a note on that shot that you've never heard. You've never heard this before.
You've never told me this. I'm riveted to know what you're about to say.
Narrator, he's heard this story before. We won't explain how or why. But
did you say narrator?
Yeah, I don't know. So I don't know. So when he's going under the bridge, I've always noticed there's these like lights of cars driving, and they're just they're real cars, and I'm just like, those are 2012 cars. We can't see it. I'm not saying it takes me out of the movie, but every time I look, I go, those are 2012 cars. They don't really in a movie right now, and I'm always like, they don't realize that they've been forever immortalized in this movie. But anyways, I always think of that every time I see that shot because I don't know.
Is it as distracting as the guy in jeans in Gladiator? Because that's the thing.
So Gladiator will not be talked about on this podcast because I've seen it one time, so I don't even know what you're talking about.
I've only seen it once too. I don't know. It's not my favorite. It's too long.
All right,
it's some of the best dialogue, but continue.
Next week, Gladiator.
We'll watch it 4 times
for the second time.
Yeah,
We'll start a new podcast called The Watchables.
Jesus Christ.
All right. So okay. All right. So next, favorite editing. Now this doesn't.
What's your favorite shot?
Oh yeah. Oops. All right. So yeah, my favorite shot is when Freddy wakes up on top of the ship. I think it's just such a cool shot. It looks cool. I think it's a good. Once again, it shows character, reveals character. I mean, he's just, he's crazy. Crazy night of partying. And then also I think what's interesting is apparently PTA got the idea of that, and actually got the idea of a lot of this stuff from talking with Jason Robards about his time in the war on the set of Magnolia. So I think that's pretty cool. All right. So favorite editing. So favorite editing, it can literally mean your favorite cut, like the bone cut in 2001. Or it can be like, really like the way he edited the scene or something like that. It doesn't have to be, or this montage or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. For me, I would say probably, you mentioned it a second ago, but during the processing scene, it cuts to black it cuts to Massachusetts, Lynn, Massachusetts. And we don't quite know if we're in some backstory yet. We don't know what this is. We find out very quickly that it's a memory. And just the moment that we're there, we see the white picket fence, we see the row houses, very 1950s, very Blue Valentine. Everything's fine, and before anyone has spoken, there's no music. It's completely silent. And I just like that cut because it takes us kind of into another world. We're not sure if he's dreaming. We don't know what it is. Very, very dream logic kind of feel to it. And it's a very, very, very quiet, sort of subtle transition into a memory that we don't really always see in that same way. So I really appreciate that as an editing choice. What about you?
All right. So I have a specific cut that is my favorite cut in the whole movie. And it is when he asks the girl out, and then it just immediately cuts to him. The next girl on the date just passed out asleep. This is so funny to me. It's just like, you want to go out tonight? And it just cuts to him. And she's just like sitting there next to him, just like looking at him so pissed. She's like kind of like touching her food. It is so funny. And it's hilarious. And I feel like telling you that I have to tell you a story about a date that I had. Okay, so I have fallen asleep on a date twice.
What?
So yeah. So I mean, but at the movies, like it wasn't like him or I'm sleeping at dinner.
My first thought was you were like,
yeah. No, that's normally the girls. Like she's like PTA, Scorsese. Yeah. But so the first one was not that big a deal. It was like it was with a girlfriend. This was my high school, college girlfriend, whatever. Whatever time we officially did. And we went and saw like Harry Potter, and it was boring. I felt it wasn't that big a deal. We were in a relationship, but one time it was I fell asleep on a first and only date. Was so like it's these YA movies. I just can't do them. I was for a Hunger Games movie, and she really wanted. That's what she wanted to do. So I was like, okay. And I was like super excited for this date because I really liked this girl. And so, of course, because I was super excited, I didn't really sleep well.
It's not Christmas morning.
And so, like, I guess it was. And I got cold, but so so we go out to eat first, and like the date went fine. Like there was nothing. Like the date was normal, and then I apparently. So Hunger Games, I think it was the second one. I don't know. I've never seen any of them all the way through. So
they're actually pretty good, but continue.
And so we're watching it, and I kid you not, the next thing I know is I'm getting like hit in the ribs, like elbowed in the ribs to wake up. And she had to do it not once, not twice, but 3 times in the movie. And she informed me that I was legitimately snoring. So
no.
But yeah, so I did not see her again. She was in my class, and I genuinely don't think this is the reason why, but she did drop the class. Maybe it was the reason why. But anyways, so yeah, that was
my favorite part about that story is that she was perfectly pleasant and did nothing wrong, and she picked like a perfect date movie. Catching Fire, come on.
When did I say that she was in the wrong?
You didn't. I just find that part funny.
Yeah. I mean, it's my,
Look, you know what it is. I fell asleep in front of. Well, actually, I can't. I don't sleep very well.
I thought something way worse. You're like, I fell asleep during sex.
No. Well, I very well could have. Anyway, yeah.
Awesome.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yep. Okay. So next, favorite moment. So favorite moment is, it's not a scene. It's not a shot. It's not an edit. It's a moment. So it's kind of like, it could be anything from like the ways somebody reacts as a line, like the way that his eye comes up when he says this. It can be expanded a little bit more than that, if you'd like. But mine are kind of like Mine are pretty much performance moments, at least for this film. So yeah, you want me to go first? You want to go first? I have a couple.
You go first.
So my favorite moment. This is my number one, but there is. I love at the end of the wedding when they're like saying their goodbyes and like.
Oh yeah.
Philip Seymour comes in. He's like, hello, and he's like the way he handshakes like Norman, and he gives the handshake. It's like so, and then he's like, don't get up, we have won. The day is over, and we have won the day. It's like it's so. I know people like it's like it's so good because if you've been in a room with it's like a youth pastor or like a cool boss or someone that's in power that's like it's kind of a performance, but there's also a little bit of genuineness to it. Like it's like it's a difference between like you're completely full of shit. Like it's like you do seem to actually kind of like us, but also like you're really playing it, and it's just the way he does it is so perfect. And that's all performance. Like I'm sure it says, it has those things, and he reads that and he's like, he knows. I love that. And it's just like it literally cracks every Norman. And then on top of that, another one with that he does is when they're at the party before the pig fuck, and she's like they're at the party and she says her sandwich. He's like the little sandwiches. And then she's like, yeah, we gonna drink? He's like, an old fashioned for me. Just the way he does it. It's just like he just really embodied it. I don't know, it's just like it's so funny to me. It's stupid, but it's just that cracks me up. And then also when they're doing the pick a point thing and he's like thrilling, it's just like I don't know, it cracks me. These are like moments that like are not supposed to be jokes, but I think this is why I'm like There Will Be Blood is hilarious to me, because like Daniel Plainview does a bunch of these where I'm just like cracking up, and then I'm like, it's not really a joke. But then last, and this is one that I've only mentioned once in the podcast, but I will become a new thing for me, I think, is when Laura Dern's like talking to him and he's like yes, yes. he's like trying to play off like it's really important, like he's like yes. But yeah, those are mine.
I'll just say one of my favorite moments is in the jail scene, and after they get in the fight and Lancaster Dodd just like says, I'm done with you, and then he turns around and literally starts peeing into his toilet, which Freddie has just destroyed his toilet. So it's just like, to me, it reminds me of Inglourious Basterds when they do the pipe and he pulls out the little pipe and then he pulls out the much bigger pipe and it's just like, my pipe is bigger than yours. Just, it's the most just like, that is not, I can't believe that was actually written. That just has to be something just in the moment. It's so funny to me.
I never even thought of it like that. That is hilarious.
It's so funny.
Oh, you don't have a toilet anymore. I do.
Yeah. See what happens when you break your toilet? I'm gonna piss in my.
Well, we know it wasn't written because famously, Joaquin Phoenix broke that toilet and they had to pay for it, and they were really upset because apparently it's like a really old toilet.
Mm-hmm.
So that is funny. That is good. I'm gonna start doing like that's my like I want to be in an argument where like my mic drop is taking a piss. Like that is awesome.
You have to be in a bathroom during the argument. You do know that, right?
Not necessarily. It's like, yeah. It's like, so what if I fell asleep 3 times during the day?
You're outside the theater? That's so gross.
Yeah. I'm in the theater.
You're in the popcorn bucket.
Yeah. It's the new popcorn bucket. It's a toilet. It's the I don't know what movie a toilet popcorn bucket.
The new Pixar.
That's the master popcorn button. It's a toilet and it breaks and there's popcorn in it. Anyways,
that's amazing.
Okay, so next category. What is your favorite performance in the film?
I think it's easy, and this might be able to lead into our dynamics a little bit. Mine is Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's not only one of my favorite actors, which is, most people would agree he's one of the best. But I also think it's possibly my favorite performance of his. My favorite line reading of his is from Moneyball, which is when he says, "You are outside your mind." But performance as a whole, it's got to be Lancaster Dodd. And Philip Seymour Hoffman in this movie just embodies something that I think is really hard as an actor, I'm sure, to embody, which is that he's playing it as truthfully as he can, as any actor should. But I think inside of that performance, Philip Seymour Hoffman, as the actor, knows how full of shit Lancaster Dodd is, and it's almost like he's using that as like a way to show us that he kind of is aware, but he's trying not to show his other, cohorts that he is full of shit. And it's just such a layered performance, but he makes it look effortless. So yeah, that's my favorite. What about you?
That's a good choice because obviously every single one of my favorite moments was from his performance. So I love that performance. As I said, this is probably like my favorite acting film all around, all the performances. Having said that, my favorite performance is Joaquin Phoenix. As I said, I would say it's probably my second favorite performance of all time. I think Robert De Niro and Raging Bull is my favorite because that's also my favorite film. But I just think I love the over the topness. I love the fact that he can be so over the top, and then he also can. There's moments where he's so like small and so vulnerable, and I just think the juxtaposition of all those things, it fits this character, but it really fits the story. That's really what the story is about, and I do think that like it's always harder to play the straight man in the routine, and so I do think Philip Seymour Hoffman has a harder job. But it's kind of like, and I don't mean this, and it's funny. This is weird saying this because Joaquin Phoenix literally played the Joker, but it's kind of like Batman Joker thing where it's like Joker is supposed to steal the show,
right?
Like what if Batman steals the show, then the person playing Joker is not doing a good job, and so it's like Freddy's kind of like that character, like he should have these crazy weird moments and all this. Yeah, it's not to say that Philip Seymour Hoffman. I mean, I think he's great. I think you can't really go wrong with any choice in this film. But yeah, Joaquin's my favorite. I just love that performance, and I just love the just the difference and how far it goes. And I think that also playing someone who doesn't change, and playing someone who doesn't have a lot of inner thoughts and it is mostly just like you said, he's the id, so it is just like emotion. I think it's probably pretty difficult to do and not come off super cartoonish. Yeah, and I think people can argue that it is a little cartoonish, and I think that's fair. I mean, people are allowed to be wrong in a free country, but I do think watching that documentary, there's people in that documentary that if you didn't know a documentary, you'd go, that's overacting. Like, I think,
right.
The people can be intense, and they do talk about him being insane and everything. And it's not just PTSD. He clearly has like some serious issues. So,
I definitely think that that's a good choice. And I think it pairs well with, that's kind of how we see ourselves in a way. I mean, the whole movie's, like I touched on earlier, it is about everybody having these different feelings. I do want to shout out Amy Adams. I just think she brings a weight to this movie that I don't think most people really recognize the way that they should, because she really is playing somebody that is essential to the dynamic and is playing that kind of like, if you would just get out of the way, they could be in love kind of role. But with this intensity that like only Peggy could say the line by the end, like you either do it for a billion years or not at all, which is like an insane line to have to read, but she does it with such truthfulness and authority that I just find that she is a really, really important addition to this movie. And then of course, Jesse Plemons, who just is excellent in this movie. And honestly, I feel like he should have been in the movie more. And one of my least favorite moments of the movie, just because it gives me a bad taste in my mouth, is when he's the one to greet Freddy when he walks in at the end, and he's at the school and he's dressed all nice, just because he's the one he's the first one to tell Freddy this is just made up. And yet we see him walk in and he's fully consumed the role of somebody. And he almost looks a little bit, I don't know how much we want to get into that, but like he has kind of a David Miscavige look to him, who is now the guy who sort of is in charge of Scientology. And so and he's a pretty dark character. So it's just really unsettling, and he plays it unsettling. And he's, we just saw him in Begonia. He's really good at that. But yeah, those extra performances just sort of make up a pretty important world inside of this movie.
Yeah, I agree. Also, I don't remember the actor's name, but the guy that's also in There Will Be Blood and The Mummy, famously. That guy is awesome. I can't remember his name.
Who is he in there? There Will Be Blood. Is he the one I want to slit your throat? That guy?
He's the one who is pretending to be his brother.
Oh yes, he's amazing.
Yeah, he's really good. I apologize, I do not remember his name. I guess I could look him up. I don't know if that's podcasting.
He is in the shot that people like. It's in film books now. In There Will Be Blood. For those who are curious, he's Daniel Plainview. He claims to be his brother, and he's in that shot when
Evan J. O'Connell.
Yes, Evan. He is in shadow on the beach. And then Daniel Plainview is in the bright sun, and it's like a very famous shot. It's in a lot of film books and 1001 movies you should see before you die and all that kind of stuff. So very, very good. Shout out for him.
Yeah. All right. So next we have highlight a deliberate artistic choice that you like. Favorite deliberate artistic choice. So that can be anything from like. The best way to describe this is like if I already talked about it, but if I want to say shot in 70 millimeter, decided like this, I liked this movie was shot in black and white. This one wasn't, but, example. So that's kind of what this is. So it's a way to kind of talk about the actual like filmmaking and the actual artistry behind it, not just this plot, So would you like to go first?
Yeah, I would just say that, it's kind of a given in a way that it's built around this, but the use of water, we meet him when he's on a beach, and then he is sort of it opens with water, it closes with water, he meets Lancaster Dodd on water, and there's probably 10 million books that talk about, the use of water as imagery, but it is very true that it represents something that's sort of what Lancaster Dodd is sort of trying to manifests as his own religion, which is like this idea of we've always been here for a billion years. And, water alludes to this idea of like somehow this is, life has been teeming for a long time before we showed up. And the hubris to think that somebody like Lancaster Dodd could claim that he's been around as long as dinosaurs is kind of the joke of the movie in a way. And it's, I think, why people thought this was a takedown of Scientology, because that's a lot of what they believe. But, and I don't subscribe to that belief, but I just love that use of water.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I have to push back on is about him being as old as dinosaurs is like, you haven't seen the extended version, but it opens up with the guys from Jurassic Park getting a little thing from the, getting the bug. And again, yeah. And that's how they make him.
That's how they make human.
Yeah, that's how it works. Anyways, so my favorite. By the way, that joke is staying in the podcast.
Everything's staying in the podcast. Even me getting up to open the door for a Mormon is staying in the podcast.
Yeah. So my highlight
was somebody from Scientology.
No. So my highlight, my deliberate artist choice, I love. So I do love that he's shot in 70 millimeter. And I love, and this is more of like a PTA thing than the specific film, is like, I like that he shoots with a deeper depth of field. And so it's gotten really popular in modern films to shoot with a very shallow depth of field. And I don't know the exact reason why, but I think part of the reason is as we've grown up, and it's like you look at videos on your iPhone, you look at the videos on your computer and everything, they're deeper depth of field because you don't have the just it's simpler. I could go over all that, but I think people have now people start thinking of deeper depth of field means cheaper, and there's a lot of YouTube videos about how to get that shallow depth of field, that cinematic shallow depth of field look. And so a lot of people now are starting to think like shallow depth of field automatically equals cinematic. But the thing is, when you look back and you watch films, that's not really the case. Like you watch like Jaws, you watch Raiders of the Lost Ark, you watch Stalker, you watch The Godfather. It's not like every movie, all these great films, it's just like the person in frame, then everything's out of focus. Like that's not like, there's a great time to use those kind of lenses and to use that kind of look, but the deeper depth of fields have always existed. And that's one of the reasons why Citizen Kane is considered one of the best films ever, is its innovation of that. So I like the fact that he does that he does it when he has close-ups. They are these huge close-ups. We've talked a lot about them, obviously, but then a lot of times he lets it play in mediums or lets it play in wides, and you can see everything in focus. And I think that helps bring you to the 1950s, because it's like you're not on a film set. You're not on, and I think that's part of the problem is like, even if you're shooting on a real location, but everything is always out of focus, it's like, it doesn't look that much different than if you're shooting on a green screen in Atlanta and throwing something in the background, you know? So
right.
It's shot on location. They found, 1950s authentic locations still, or they rebuilt things, and you can see it. And, you can see the actual production design. You can see the costumes. You can see everything. It just feels like your characters are in a real world. And I really like that way of filmmaking. And he also, on top of that, part of that goes into it is he lets the actors tell the story. And what I mean by that is, like, if you watch certain films, it's like, okay, like I'm talking and then you talk and it cuts to you automatically. It cuts to me back. And it's just, you're kind of like building it through a sequence of smaller shots to like do the whole scene. And whereas he's got very deliberate cutting. He lets the actors kind of tell the story, and he cuts really when needed. And it's like, when it's time for something to emphasize, you cut to close up. If it's not emphasized, maybe it's a wider, maybe you let it play longer, and you move the actors and you move the camera versus just automatically cutting. And I think that helps with that same thing of kind of immersion into the world. And it basically, it creates this thing where you have to be an active viewer. Like, you kind of have to, there's a scene where Freddy is in the bathroom right after he's getting ready for the wedding, and he sees like the books, and he like looks at it, and you can tell like there's like a about author page, and it's clearly supposed to be Philip Seymour Hoffman. And like, if you're watching and you're being an active viewer, you're like, okay, so he sees the book, and it's going to be explained later on, versus like, I think a studio would be like, you have to cut to a close up of that book. Like, people aren't, and so it's like, he's not he's not very forgiving for passive viewers. And I think that's one reason why he has like kind of this reputation of being like kind of a difficult director for audiences. And part of that is like, it doesn't matter how you can be watching Magnolia with 20 eyes. You're still not going to really understand exactly why the frogs are falling from the sky the first time you see the movie. He's obtuse, regardless. But I do think that some of that comes from, he's like, you got to watch the movie. Like, I'm making it. And I think that's what makes these films, better to watch on repeated viewings, and it makes it more immersive, and, all that stuff. So that's kind of, that's my choice. And that I could pick that for every single PTA film for the sake of this podcast, because I know we'll eventually do almost all of them. I won't, but it's the first time, so I want to break it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So category favorite quote. Would you like to go first?
No, you go first, because I want to hear yours. Mine's gonna be better.
Okay. My favorite quote comes in their last scene together. And Dodd says, "If you figure a way to live without serving any master, then let the rest of us know, will you? For you'd be the first person in the history of the world." And I think that the reason that's my favorite quote is just a great quote. But I think it pretty much captures like the whole movie, is like the idea that everybody has a master, master is, Peggy. But like, even like Joaquin's, like, Freddy's master is his urges. He can't fight his urges. He's a slave to his urges. And, it reminds me of the Bob Dylan song, "Gotta Serve Somebody." It's like, it doesn't matter who you are. You're serving somebody, even if it is, you're serving yourself, and not in a good way, Freddy's serving himself, but not in a good way, So, so I think that quote kind of captures the whole film. So, and it's just a cool sounding quote.
My favorite quote is, "Come and join us. Leave your worries for a while. They'll still be there when you get back, and your memories aren't invited," which I just find to be a really good bookend to what you just said, which is like, this is at the beginning of their relationship when they've just met on the ship, and he's inviting him to his daughter's wedding, which is a very intimate thing to do for somebody you just met. But clearly, like you were saying, they seem to have this connection that goes back somehow emotionally for them. And there's also, by the end, they get to the point where there's a rift between them that they can't fix. And so he's kind of like, I invited you into my life. I said that I won't judge you for your past sins or your past trauma. I won't, I won't put that on you. I'll take that burden for you. Your memories aren't invited. And yet by the end, he's saying, like, I couldn't help you. I couldn't be that person for you. So if you can find someone, or if you can find a way to live without that, because clearly, I thought I was the one person who could fix that for you, who could take that burden on for you. If I can't do it, then perhaps we can, you can live without it, and maybe you're the only one who can do that. So I wish you luck, and it's a bit of a sad story between the two of those guys, but those two quotes I think are really good sort of bookends for each other.
Yeah, I agree. So the next category is called cinematic echoes, which is like, it's something that, things that it's film references, or if it's an older film, some movies that are referencing it. So for this one, the big one I think is, I'm thinking of Jonathan Demme and how he shoots a lot of close-ups of faces, and how PTA has always been pretty honest in saying that he feels Jonathan Demme is his biggest influence, which I've always found interesting, because I think it's easy to point out Scorsese and Altman and John Huston, and I think it's a little harder to see Demme's influence. I don't think he wears Demme's influence on his sleeve as obvious as maybe he's actually taking from him. But this particular film, because Demme, you think of especially like in Silence of the Lambs, there's so many scenes that Demme's done where it's just close-ups. I mean, the opening of Philadelphia, there's just a bunch of them. So I think this movie, shooting a bunch of faces, is kind of reminds me of Demme in a way. And then another thing that's like obvious that I just talked about was the John Huston Let There Be Light documentary. He took things straight from that. I have Sam Fuller's Steel Helmet, which there's a shot earlier in that movie where it's like war, and so the way they're looking at the guy with the helmet, and it's just like framed in a very similar way as that second shot of this film with Joaquin wearing the helmet. I feel like it, and that both films hold on it like super long, even though nothing's really happening. So I feel like that's probably intentional. Orson Welles is The Lady from Shanghai. They have a sequence where they ask for an able-bodied seaman, and it's spoken of and kind of shot exactly like the moment in this film. And then I've got two more. One, it might be a stretch. I don't know. I have no idea if it's intentional or not, but it opens, with the shot of the water, and you're seeing the water trickling from the boat. And that's pretty much kind of how the opening of the original Godzilla is it's looking down at water, and it's kind of trickling from the boat. And I wonder if it's like, kind of like, these are two films about, this like how we deal with the trauma of the war, Japanese, created a giant lizard, and we created Scientology,
So, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. And then the last one is like when Freddy, accidentally poisons that, that farmer, he runs out the door, and it's, like the classic, like, Searcher's doorway shot. And I definitely feel like it's an amazing shot, and I think it's intentional, because the whole idea of that shot in The Searchers is to imply that like John Wayne's character can never be domesticated. He's always going to be out, which is exactly what Freddy's situation is. He can't be domesticated. So I just threw down a bunch, but you have any, or did I cover all of them, or anything you're thinking?
No, I mean, nothing that comes to mind. I do agree that there's a lot of like intentionality behind those choices that you're talking about. Some are more obvious. What's fun about those like echoes that you're talking about is some of them are pretty obvious. Like he knows that we know about the Searchers, but some of them can be inferred a little bit more of like, I don't know if only I feel this way about, using the water this way with The Lady from Shanghai, things like that. But yeah, this is what I think. And then you can kind of read into it if you want to. And maybe that was never intended, but it's fun to kind of play that game as you watch the movie for the, 12th time or whatever.
If I told PTA that he referenced Godzilla, he would go, yes.
Actually, I think he would skip directly to what do you want?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
All right. So next we have category I'm lost. So this is kind of just like, it can be a nitpick, or it can be more like this didn't work, whatever, or like I don't understand what's going on. So I've got a couple. They're not too crazy. But first point, pick a point seems like a really stupid game.
Oh, the most boring game I've ever heard of.
I know it's like I know it's the 1950s and there's not as much stuff to do, but like you just pick a point. It's just dumb. Yeah. And my next question is, was Freddy messed up before the war? I think obvious, but
Yeah, I think with the anti-Bertha stuff, I think he's kind of off as a rocker a little bit. I mean, not to say that you can't perform in incest if you want to, but I think it maybe isn't necessary.
Yeah, probably not.
So there's a lot of fish in the sea, and
yeah. And then two more. So is Amy Adams the real master? We have the scene where she's jerking off Dodd, and obviously the power play there. You talked about the scene where they get kicked out, and she's complaining and everything while he's dictating, and it's like there's not, again, a filmmaker that's more about passive viewership would have a cut close up of what he's writing. We don't know exactly what he's writing. Is he interpreting that into something? Is it just what? But I think that, like you said, I mean, her being the super ego, if that's your interpretation, then the answer is yes. But yeah, I think it's worth mentioning just the way that the category is set forth. We don't talk a whole lot about her, so that's the main reason why I asked. Is even though I think I already know the answer, I just it's just a way to jumping off. If there's anything else you want to say about her.
No, I don't. You know what I mean? I guess my knee-jerk reaction to that question is just no, but only because she doesn't want to be, or no, because at that time she could not be. You need somebody like a Lancaster Dodd figure to kind of take that on, because it's a big thing to do, and only a big man with a large booming voice in the 50s could start a religion, and that's kind of true, especially in that time. So I don't think that I think she would have gotten called out for it really quickly, and she knows that, and she's smart enough to know that putting him at the forefront in order to get what she wants, which is just to she has that one moment, which is almost, I don't know if it's meant to be sad, but I always feel kind of bad for her. Her only moment of her being in the limelight is when she announces his book on the bottom of the stairs in front of everyone. That scene is just oh, you really could have done this in another lifetime, which is kind of its own, intertextual question of in another lifetime, could she have been the master is an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if she's the master, it's from a standpoint of she has a control of his life to the point that she's not specifically telling him what to or to not put in the book, but it's he's I can't, there's no way I can do this because she's not gonna, that kind of way. But yeah, I agree. Yeah. And the last thing, which will be able to talk about a scene that I really like, but my last question is, did the cause in a small way kind of work for Freddie? And the reason I asked that is I think the scene where Freddie goes back to Doris's house at the end of the movie and talks to her mom is the only scene in the film where he acts kind of like a regular person. Yeah. And I just don't think it's a coincidence that it happens post the cause. And I feel I know we've already talked about he doesn't really change much. So I'm not saying he changes a ton, but I'm I really love that scene. I think it's him much more reserved. And I think his scene partner, she's doing really well, really good. It's just a really interesting scene. And that's the first scene that when I started liking the second half as much as the first half, that was the scene I really latched onto. Because it's very melancholy. And I think it's to me, that's the closest. It's maybe he went from if he's on a 1, if he's a 1 on the scale, he moved to a 1.2. It's not much, but I feel like something maybe changed a little bit. But
yeah, I think he's a little bit more world weary than he was when we first met him. I do, when I was watching that scene the most recent time, I was it was so interesting to watch the woman's face, Doris's mom, because she does seem a little bit afraid of him. She's encountered this guy who's a little off his, rocker a little bit. And then as you watch the scene and he's like talking, with a little bit more patience and nuance, she's and asking the right questions and letting her speak. Like, I think she's like, oh, you kind of see it on her face. Like, oh, he's kind of okay now. Like, so I don't know what it is. I don't know what happened, but he's like, he's kind of, something, he's been through something. He's actually grieving something, and I think it's an interesting read on the end of that storyline for him.
Great. I don't know why. Yeah.
That's fucking awesome. Cool, man.
Yeah, no, I agree. Do you have anything under the I Am Lost?
He, I a little bit on the same note of like what we've been talking about throughout the whole thing is just like, I mean, outside of Scientology, within the movie itself, I just want to know, is he tapped into something or not? Is Lancaster Dodd tapped into the secret truth of the universe, or if he is full of shit? I think the movie kind of tells us the truth.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's this question of, like, with what you're saying, with him seemingly to know Freddy at the beginning a little bit somehow, and him sort of believing in something, and we never really quite figure out what it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think like a scene that kind of helps even push that and make it more blurry is like when Freddy is like at the theater and he falls asleep, not on a date. It's like again, that's more active viewership. There's not like some little thing where it's like it's a dream. It's like he's like watching, and all of a sudden it's like dream logic. This guy shows up with this super long cord and a phone, and he's like talking to Dodd in his dream, telling him to come to London, and then he wakes up. I love the way that he does that, but that's another good editing choice. Is when he goes and talks to Dodd, he's like, in my dream. So it's like Freddy is acknowledging that he already had a dream about him. So he could just be the greatest bullshitter ever and be like, yes. And then that's what, or it's like, but it's like, oh, well, he's like, yes. And he tells it. And it's like, well, did he actually talk to him? It's like, it keeps it, I think, and he does it, intentional. And I really like that, where I do like most likely, I think the safest reading is like, yes, he's full of shit, but I do like the fact that it's open a little bit, that if you want to say, is there something special with him? I think that's pretty interesting. Which actually goes into my studio note. So if you're ready to move on.
Let's do studio notes.
So studio note is just basically what you would, change, something you would change, or a lot of times it's to answer your what you do to fix your I'm lost questions. The reason we say like our kind of mindset, I think, on this show for studio notes is not to change the artistic intention. So it's like, I think there's a lot, especially like on YouTube and stuff, there's a lot of film analysis and film criticism that's kind of like, well, he didn't make the movie I wanted to make, so this is kind of more, we're trying to look at what the artistic intention and trying to maybe make changes under that instead. So but my studio note is really simple. I love this movie. There's a deleted scene where, so they go and get Dodd's secrets. That's in the film, but there's a deleted scene where he asks Freddy to guard them overnight. And it's actually in the trailer where he's like standing there, like Freddy's sitting there with like a 6-shooter. It's a cool shot in the trailer, but and he at one point eventually he opens up the secrets and he looks into it. And to go with what we just talked about, how it's kind of like vague on what if Dodd is actually some mythical creature, being or power or whatever, is when he opens it, it's like it's a callback to Kiss Me Deadly or Pulp Fiction. There's like literally a fire, like he opens it up, fire comes out, and like Freddy closes it, opens it back up, fire comes out, and then Freddy just stares at it, and it's like he's staring into the eyes of God, right? He's staring in the secret, and then he just closes it, like bored. And then the very next scene is the scene where Dodd, they're introducing the new book, and then Dodd says, like, the key is laughter, and then it cuts to Freddy, and it's kind of like, what? And it's like he's like seeing the bullshit, literally stares at, and then I've always felt like the reason it cuts to Freddy, like kind of at that, is like Freddy laughs in the processing scene over the fart, and so it's like he's like, is Master like taking stuff from it? Like, is this all bullshit? Like he's just taking from everybody, and then that dovetails into him talking to Kevin J. O'Connor and saying like, what do you think of the book? And he's like, I think it stinks. And then Freddy beats him up, and it's just like, it's like that whole little moment is like and then of course he leaves the very next scene. He drives off in the best game of the year. You pick your point. And so I just feel like the narrative momentum of that would work so much better with that additional scene, because then it's like more obvious why he's leaving. And I know the reason why is like we've talked about it. PTA doesn't like to spoon feed. I still don't think that in the grand scheme of things that spoon feeds much in this movie. I think it actually, and I think the way I think it would be spoon feeding if he opens it up and there's like a manifesto of like, I faked all this. But the fact that it is like abstract in and of itself, I think would still make it work. I think it would make it work better. I think it would be more interesting if that was left in.
Yeah, I completely agree, because I've always been, even when I kind of figured out, oh, he's upset and that's why he's leaving because he doesn't believe in the cause or whatever. I still, for the longest time, even now, I'm like, huh? Like, he's just mad all of a sudden, and it's just because I still, until we talked about this, don't really know why the speech from Lancaster Dodd upsets Freddie in the way that he does in that second book announcement speech. And so it's just interesting. He's just like, I think including that scene would just help us understand, like, he has seen, behind the curtain of something. We don't know what it is. It's still very vague, but somehow he saw behind the curtain and then he's upset. And that inclusion of that scene, I think, would really help. But again, it just doesn't work that way. We just have to kind of figure it out for ourselves, which is very on theme with this movie and with this type of movie.
Yeah. No, I understand the reason why he kept it out, and I, respect it. I'm not going to tell PTA how to make his movie, but I'm going to tell him how to make. What about you? You've got what is your studio note?
For me, I've always found the ending when he goes to London, and I like that. I mean, obviously, Slow Boat to China is one of the best scenes up there with processing. But after that, when he's at the pub and he gets the girl, and I understand it kind of brings it back to the beginning, but I don't know. I guess I kind of like it with more time. When I was younger, I really didn't like that last few minutes. I was like, okay, hurry up.
Just get to the end. You're literally at the end.
Yeah. But no, I think the movie does take a little bit of time. I guess my least favorite part of the movie, and the note I would make, is the scene when he's trying to be a part of the cause, and he does like he's pretending to do the practice.
Oh, and he's like handing out flyers, all that kind of thing? Or no.
No, that scene and the from when you go from the window to the wall and
which I really do think, because BTA is open to lowbrow. I think that is a direct reference to the song. I really do.
Probably. I just don't really like that stuff as much. I find that to be a little bit like, that could be a little bit more montage, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it kind of is a montage, but just kind of a slow one. And I think part of the idea is, like, since the whole idea of it is repetition, is right. Like, that's their way of getting you, is like, I think that's why it is. But like, I could see that being a little shorter. I mean, I don't, it doesn't really bother me, but I can understand. Like, that's a respectable take.
It's a 2 hour and 18-minute movie that I think could be 2 hours. I guess there's times and little elements that I could cut out personally, but I'm not in charge. So
nope. Okay.
I don't own my own movie studio, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. So this is a category we're not going to do every time, but we will if we have one. But physical media. So if The Master is on DVD and Blu-ray, it's not on 4K, which sucks. And I don't know why it's not on 4K. I think Annapurna didn't go out of business, but they're not really doing great. I wonder if that's part of the reason. I would recommend this Blu-ray for anyone who wants physical media, because it does come with the Let There Be Light documentary we've been talking about in full, which is cool. And it also has all the deleted scenes I talked about edited together by PTA as like one 20-25 minute thing. So I think it's worth getting. Hopefully a 4K will come out soon. I could see someone like Criterion maybe eventually doing it, because it's a famous director, but not one of the bigger movies. But like, even There Will Be Blood doesn't have a 4K yet. So I don't know what's going on with that.
I'm not sure. I really want a Criterion of this. I think Criterion's the perfect place for this. I could also weirdly see like Arrow Video getting their hands on this somehow or something. Like one of those sort of smaller one, or Kino Lower Brea or something. But yeah, I think it'll happen eventually. It'll be like a random Wednesday, and I'll just get a text from you from Blu-ray.com being like, "Holy shit!" Yeah,
that is exactly what or it'll be the other way around. You'll send me the text, but either way, that's what's gonna happen.
And you'll be like, "I've known for 3 hours." I'm like, "Oh, sorry about
that." One of our last categories, recommendations. So I think this is like film recommendations. If you like this movie, Let There Be Light, like I keep talking about, I think that's the obvious one. I say Lady from Shanghai because I do think there's just a lot that I think PTA, the vibe, the story itself is nothing like it, but I think PTA clearly took a lot of the vibe from that one. And then another one I'll pick is Mikey and Nikki, the Elaine May film, because that is just a really great movie that's about male friendship and the toxic of it. And I think it would be an interesting pairing with the Master.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
My choice was, weirdly enough, Enemy by Denis Villeneuve. Came out 2013, I believe. That movie is not a buddy comedy movie, but it kind of is in a way, because it features Jake Gyllenhaal playing two twins copies of himself, and so he's talking to himself throughout the movie, which is very on brand for the Master. And it just deals with identity. It deals with the idea of, you know, loneliness of being a straight white man. It calls into question like the effect that, again, straight white male effect of like the women in your lives, and how they sort of can open you up to things, but also, you know, change the way you see things. And it's also just a really good movie about, you know, processes and how to kind of discover parts of yourself that you didn't know about. So that's my recommendation.
Interesting recommendation. All right. Well, so I'm going to ask you your final thoughts before we have one more category that's kind of unique to this episode. So you have any final thoughts on the Master you want to kind of go over?
Yeah, I really have always liked this movie. I think as I get older, I'm less concerned with trying to figure it out, and I just like the moments that we've talked about throughout the movie. I think I've seen it so many times, and it's such an interesting plotted movie that it's not like when you turn on Raiders of the Lost Ark, you kind of watch it because you're going on an adventure, and then the adventure hits like a climax, and so you're like, haha, and you get that same euphoric feeling that you always get. But this movie is not like that, and so rewatching it for that feeling of like, I want to turn on a movie where, you know, the bad guys lose and everyone goes home at the end and it's all great. That's not really what this movie is. So watching it is more of a meditation on like filmmaking and the performances, or getting sort of your fill of like seeing the performances. And so for me, it's just been a movie that I turn on like if I'm just having a bad day or something. But I've always really, really liked it. And it's definitely opened me up to more movies like it, which I think is important. And I think may not have been the original intention, but kind of serves as a good intention now to be like, there are more movies like this.
Yeah. But yeah, so my final thoughts, like I said, this is, you know, my second favorite film of all time. I love this movie. This movie has inspired me probably more than any other movie as far as my filmmaking goes. As you can watch The Drifter 2013 on this YouTube page and see that I ripped it off. And the movie's not good, but so I love this movie. And the one thing like we didn't really mention much is like I think one thing that's part of this movie is that's like in all of PTA's films is like kind of finding that like surrogate family. Because I think that's one of the appeals for Freddy, is that he sees us as like a surrogate family, which is obviously like a huge theme in Boogie Nights, and you know it's a big theme. I mean, Hard Eight, it's got a surrogate father, and it kind of goes on and on. I mean, even up until One Battle After Another, you have, you know, Leo's character is a surrogate father without realizing it. But yeah, I think it's
spoiler.
Just, yeah, I mean, that movie just people have seen it. If not, fuck off. But yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's his most unique work. I don't think it's getting, you know, is even though it's my favorite of his, I know it won't go down as his best or anything like that. It's still, you know, probably There Will Be Blood and Boogie Nights and One Battle probably.
I've always had a soft spot for Inherent Vice. I really
I love Inherent Vice. I really do think in like when you like really like get super serious about a certain artist, a lot of times they're like best work. They're widely considered best work. It's not necessarily your favorite, not in like a like I'm gonna be different kind of way, but more in like when you're like really studying and like really consuming an artist, you get really interested in like their idiosyncrasies, and I think those are normally not as profound in their more popular works, which is probably one of the reasons why they're more popular. So like I do think like There'll Be Blood doesn't quite have, you know, some of like the idiosyncrasies that you see in The Master, you know, or Inherent Vice, you know.
Molto bene Keiko.
Yeah. Well, no, that one will be done for sure. Yeah. But my God, it did some trampolines. But yeah, no, I love this film, and it's an incredible movie. So so that was that. But now we have two more categories one category is unique to this podcast. So I ask you, Matt, in our friendship, who is Freddie and who is Lancaster Dodd?
I think we know the answer to this. I think people can figure it out with this podcast. Definitely you are Freddie, and I am definitely Lancaster Dodd, but we are both because I'm also driven by urges, same as you, same as everybody else. Yeah. But yeah, definitely when we first met, there was the energy that was palpable between the two of us. Yeah. I'm just like, yep, this guy's definitely a Freddie, and I'm definitely like, what do you want?
I think it ironically, I think for the podcast, it's the other way around. Because I was like, we've got to have names. Yeah. Like
exactly.
Like, well, let's have some funny names. We don't need to, what if we name this, Scientology, Tales of Scientology. And I'm like, no, we have to name it after the movie. But yeah, no, we worked in like a really small room together. It was just the two of us. And so, like 9:15 a.m., I've already downed 2 Coke Zeros, and I'm like going back and forth, walking back and forth, like all bottle of energy. And he's just like, it's 9:20 a.m. Why are we playing club music?
For people who don't understand what the fuck we're talking about, it was an interior design firm in the samples room, and we were the 2 sample dudes in a tiny room with the tiny little window. No one could see us, and we were just left alone like it was a science experiment. Yeah. And also a place where it was controlled mostly by women who we had to listen to. So very on brand. Yeah. Yeah. And our boss had her own pig fuck moments for sure. Screaming and if you have not seen that movie, our boss had her own pig fuck moments. It's one of the craziest sentences.
If you've gotten this far in the podcast, never watching The Master, you're a psycho. So
yeah, which we welcome you. We hope more. We named it the cult of movies, so we hope for psychos.
We do. We hope for psychos. All right. Well, having said that, talking about psychos. Every episode of this show, we end by asking you, America, who won the podcast, and the results are in. Oh, looks like I win again. 3 million votes for me, 1 vote for Matt. Better luck next time. Maybe if you picked Joaquin Phoenix's best performance, you would have won.
Maybe.
I'm Jacob Vinus. He's Matt Whalen. This has been The Master on the Cause Cult of Movies podcast. Tune in next week for another movie that we haven't figured out yet. Good night, America.
Goodbye.